Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jay Shaw, and I'm this year's chair of the VIP Distinguished Speaker Series. The VIP program is one of the many events the Undergraduate Business Council puts on for the Macomb School of Business. Today, I'm humbled to introduce Dean Tom Gilligan, Dean of the Macomb School of Business, and Mr. Ken Chenault, CEO of American Express Company. Today's event will be a Q&A between Dean Gilligan and Mr. Chenault, after which we'll open the floor up to the audience for Q&A. As a reminder, today's event will end promptly at 7 p.m. Please refrain from leaving early using electronic devices and flash photography. Mr. Chenault is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of American Express Company. Mr. Chenault joined the company in September 1981, and a little over a decade later, he became President of Travel-Related Services. In 1995, he assumed responsibility for the company's worldwide card and travel businesses and was also named Vice Chairman of American Express. Mr. Chenault became President and Chief Operating Officer in February 1997. A short 4 years later, he assumed his current responsibilities as CEO and Chairman in 2001. Before American Express, Mr. Chenault was a management consultant at Bain & Company from 1979 to 1981 and an attorney with Roger & Wells from 1977 to 1979. Mr. Chenault serves on the board of American Express and several other organizations and companies, including IBM, the Procter & Gamble Company, NYU Langone Medical Center, the Arthur Ashe Institute for Urban Health, the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia University, the Smithsonian Institution's Advisory Council for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and lastly, the World Trade Center Memorial Foundation. He's also on the boards of Partnership for New York City, the Business Council, and the Business Roundtable, and serves as Vice Chairman for each of these organizations. A wide variety of civic and social service and community organizations have also recognized Mr. Chenault for his public service leadership. His awards include the Phoenix House Public Service Award, the Corporate Responsibility Award from the International Rescue Committee, and the Wall Street Rising Leadership Award, among others. In addition, he's a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Mr. Chenault holds a JD from Harvard Law School and a BA from History from Bowdoin College, and has received a number of honorary degrees from several other universities. Please help me give a warm, Texas-sized welcome to Dean Gilligan and Mr. Chenault.
Well, thanks, Jay. Everybody hear me okay? Great, thank you very much. Ken, welcome.
It's great to be here.
We're glad to have you here in Texas.
It's great to be in Texas.
The weather's a little bit better than in New York recently, but
Substantially.
we
better.
hear we're substantially better. Well, welcome. We want to kick this Q&A off with a question from Don Noss. He was here recently. He's the CEO of Clorox, and he has a question for you.
Okay.
Ken, my first job of any significance was working in the steel mills in East Chicago, Indiana, and that had a profound effect on me. It was tough work, and I knew I wanted to get out of that kind of work. I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life, so I worked hard in school, obviously. I'm curious, what was the first job that you had that had really a real impact, a significance on you as you formed your business aspirations?
So my first job was when I was 12 years old, and I worked as a stock boy and a bagger at my neighborhood grocery store. And it was a terrific experience because one is I worked with a family-owned business, and I saw people who were very passionate about business, but also saw how important it was to serve your customer. Mm-hmm. And frankly, bagging groceries you can do in a lot of different ways, and you can engage in conversation with the customers. But I think what really impressed me was the service aspect of the business and how you could make a difference no matter what level you had in a company. But very frankly, that did not inspire me to go into business. I had zero interest in business. It was a job. And it was a job I enjoyed, but at that time, I wanted to be a professional basketball player.
I'm just guessing that you're not tall enough to have achieve that.
Well, and also somewhat mixed in with ability. But I still had the desire. My one claim to fame, this will date me, but one of my good friends, and still is a good friend, was Julius Erving, Dr. J,
yeah.
and we played together against each other in high school, and we beat them by 1 point
Outstanding.
on a last-second shot.
Your shot?
My shot. Thank you.
Unbelievable. Congratulations. Let's give him a hand
That's
for
the
that.
end. That's the end of the career.
Well, you didn't have much of a basketball career, but you've had a remarkable commercial career that's been characterized, frankly, by some early and often promotions. Could you tell us and share with us a little bit what you think set you apart from your peers and caused you to end up where you are today?
Yeah, I think what's important, and I would say, Dean, what was critical to me that I think set me apart was I believe to be successful in business, you always have to take a little bit of risk. And so I was the type of person who wanted to work in a business that had the toughest challenges, had really difficult issues. And people would say to me, Ken, why do you want to take that risk? Because it may not work. And my view at the time was, I can learn a lot from the experience, and I'll probably get a level of responsibility that I would not be able to get in a more established business that was doing very well. So that was the first piece that I think was very important. I think the second is that I really was not sure I wanted to be CEO of a company, nor did I necessarily think I'd have the opportunity. And so what I really tried to do was to learn a lot about all aspects of the company, because I thought at some point I would go out and try to raise money to form my own company. And so what was critical is I really sought after a range of experiences and a range of skills, and that made a big difference. The third thing that was important is every organization I was involved in, I really was focused on what it took for the team to win, rather than just focused on myself.
That's interesting. It's kind of counter to some of the advice you hear from some people often, which is find something you're good at and stick with that. Your approach is very different. Build out your portfolio of skills and try to help the organization with the deployment of all those skills.
Yeah, I think there are some people who know exactly what they want to do. From a very, very early age or when they come to a company. What I think there's always a balance. And for my makeup, I think sometimes when you have an ambition that is so outsized, there's a danger that you're not going to focus on the job at hand. There's also a danger that you're not going to take any risk. And that's a mistake in my book.
Got it. You lead one of the most impressive commercial organizations in the history today. How do you define leadership, and how do you try to apply that definition at American Express?
I think what's important for me about leadership, and I'm really passionate about leadership because I think it's critical no matter what you do, is I follow a quote from Napoleon. And I always preface this that I don't want to wind up like Napoleon. But it's a quote, frankly, that I think about every day because I think it's what a leader has to do. And the way I paraphrase the quote is, the role of a leader is to define reality and give hope. And when you think about that quote, it's very simple, but if you put it in a leadership context, what's very difficult about leadership is you'll have very well-meaning people who will try to sometimes distort reality. Not intentionally, but they may just want to tell you what you want to hear. And part of your job as a leader is really to find out what the real deal is. But that's not enough. Then you've got to put together a strategy that galvanizes people, that gives them hope that they can overcome the obstacles or achieve something that they didn't think was possible. So define reality and give hope is really what I believe is most important for a leader.
People sometimes shoot the messenger, though.
That's right, and I think that's a real problem because at the end of the day, one of the things I encourage in our company is a term I use, constructive confrontation. at any level of the organization. I want people to have the ability to speak up and to speak out, because that's how we're going to understand what reality is all about. That's how we're going to get different perspectives. So I think it's important to have that level of constructive confrontation. However, once we decide on a course of action, I want everyone on the train. Mm-hmm. It is not the time after we have decided on the course of action to say, I'm not going to go along. Yeah. That's a problem.
What's been your greatest accomplishment?
I think it's hard to pin one thing down, and I would say what's most important to me from an achievement standpoint is I've really focused on reinvention of the company constantly and transformation. And I believe the enemy of success is the status quo. And what is most dangerous is sometimes when you're successful, you get comfortable. And that is a big problem in business. You've got to constantly focus on innovation. So some of the things that we've done early on in my career, we put together a program called Membership Rewards, which has become the largest and most successful loyalty program in the world. That's something I'm excited about because I believe part of what you do in business is you create products and services. Mm-hmm. But I would say the thing that I'm most excited about and most proud about are the leaders that I've developed over the years, and to see what they've accomplished, not only at our company, but at other companies, because I think that is the ultimate compliment to a leader, are the leaders that you've developed.
Mm-hmm. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made in your career?
Fortunately, I haven't made a gigantic strategic mistake. Uh-huh. I've made product mistakes where I got very excited about a product, and we ended up selling maybe 10 units of a product. That was pretty embarrassing. I think that where the mistakes that are most concerning are when you make big strategic mistakes. Fortunately, that hasn't happened yet. But I would say that one mistake in the middle of my career that I recognize is I had someone who was a very high performer, really achieved a lot, but what I didn't probe enough was how this person treated people. And this person was a horrible manager. And what I recognized is we ended up losing 2 very high potential people from the company. Mm-hmm. I was able to hire back one, and we lost another. Mm-hmm. And I really committed to myself that the issue was not just results that you should be focused on, but how someone achieved those results and how they really lead people.
Interesting. Since 2008, there have been tremendous changes in the banking sector and in the financial services industry, a lot of regulation. How has the change since 2008 affected your industry and in particular American Express?
Sure. I think clearly, my view, the financial crisis was one of the most devastating events that the world has faced. And I would say that financial services firms, some financial services firms went over the edge in how they behaved. Mm-hmm. And so one is regulation in a number of cases was necessary. Mm-hmm. What I think is important is to have the balance of regulation where you're dealing with the abuses that were out there. And the financial services industry is now going through the process with regulators of really trying to achieve that balance. But I'm not one who takes the position that the financial services industry did not need increased regulation. I think the industry did. We've not been as impacted by Dodd-Frank because we're not a broad-based financial services firm. Where we're impacted is by the Credit Card Act and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Mm-hmm. And our view is that it's most critical to be totally transparent with customers, to be very fair in the products and services that we offer. So we've taken a very cooperative approach from a regulatory standpoint. What we've also done is engage regulators to talk about what are some of the unintended consequences. Because one of the issues with the credit card bill, parts of it are very good and very helpful. But what has happened is, particularly for the non-affluent, they have less access to credit. So what needs to be addressed is how do we make sure that those segments have access to credit, and we just don't get satisfied that we have a regulation in place that doesn't take care of segments of the society that really need access to credit.
Are they listening to that message?
Some are.
Some are.
Some are. I think it takes time. And I think that the financial crisis caused so many problems that I think the first was we've got to stem the tide.
Yeah.
I think now there is an increasing focus on what are the unintended consequences of the regulation.
Interesting. Do you think that corporations have a responsibility to give back to the communities in which they live and work?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've talked about quite a bit in public is I firmly believe that corporations exist because society allows them to exist. And that's something corporations need to understand. I mean, there's not any entitlement that corporations can exist on their own. Society allows us to exist. There needs to be a compact with society. And that means that corporations have to have a social responsibility to make a difference. And in our company, we take that very seriously by the types of causes that we're involved in, by the volunteer efforts of our company. One of the things that I'm most proud about, going back to leadership, is we've set up a leadership academy that operates worldwide that works with nonprofit groups around the world, training leaders. Because the issue is not just raising funds for nonprofits, it's making sure that you have trained and skilled leaders in those jobs.
Interesting. Do you provide any incentives or support for your executives and your management talent to help the nonprofit sector?
Absolutely. Like a lot of companies, we have gift matching programs, but also what's very, very important is we actually encourage our employees to get involved in nonprofit groups, to get involved in their neighborhoods, to get involved in the places where we have offices, but also the places where they live.
Yeah.
And the reality is that that volunteer aspect, I think, is very important for employees and very important for society overall, because it goes back to that social compact. Yeah. It's one thing for me to state that,
right,
but what our employees need to see, our people need to see, is they need to see the company in action, and they also need to take responsibility for making a difference.
Yeah.
So we encourage and support our employees in volunteering.
You've been with American Express for a long time now. How have you seen it evolve over the years, over the decades?
I think the company has changed in some very important ways. I think, number one, we talk about financial supermarkets. And what I mean by financial supermarkets are large financial services companies are involved in almost every aspect of financial services. American Express was, in fact, one of the first financial supermarkets. And we changed dramatically. So when I joined the company, was right at the start where we were becoming more like a financial supermarket. And we had acquired Shearson. We then acquired Lehman. We then acquired E.F. Hutton. We also had Fireman's Fund before I joined.
Oh, I see.
So we were an incredibly large financial services company. And as I said, I was involved in strategy, but when I started to move through the company, I developed 3 operating principles, particularly for the card businesses. And those 3 principles were we got to provide superior value to the customers and clients that we serve. We've got to do it in a way that allows us to achieve best-in-class economics, and everything we do should support and enhance the brand. And at that time, I went to Jim Robinson, the CEO, and Harvey Golub, who was the president, and I said, we have a number of businesses that I don't believe support the brand. They may be good businesses, but they're not going to support and enhance our brand. And we actually started a program to divest these companies. It was not because I believed we'd have a financial crisis in 2008, but I just did not believe that those businesses supported our brand. Want to be clear, did not think they were bad businesses. But obviously, if we had owned those businesses in 2008, let me assure you I wouldn't be sitting here today.
Because there was a mortgage business in there?
There's a mortgage business. We had Lehman. We would have been out of business.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very, very important that a company understand what I call what their soul is, what their core is, and they've got to then build from that. You can expand, but you've got to understand what you stand for.
Interesting. Now, you have a leadership role, or had a leadership role in the President's Job Council.
Right.
How did that differ from your day job? And what was your assessment of how that council is done and what role you had in that?
Sure. I think what was, most revealing to me is when you think about employment, that really goes to the heart of one of the major issues facing this country or any country. Because it's not just the economic impact, which is tremendous, but it goes to the self-esteem and confidence of the person if they have a job and they can support their family. And so I really still believe very, very strongly that jobs are one of the most important priorities for anyone who is president. And so I was quite excited about the opportunity. The focus that we had was to try to think about a very complex problem, but try to divide it into manageable chunks, if you will. And so part of my role on the council was to develop an approach. And my approach was to really segment things on what are short, medium, and long-term objectives. So the short-term objective was one, could we create a number of jobs purely from executive order of the president? So what were areas? Travel and tourism, for example, if we could reduce the amount of time it took to get a visa, that could be 500,000 to 1 million jobs. President Obama did implement some of those recommendations. We also looked at different industry sectors and their growth rates and what investments we needed to make. We also highlighted what are improvements that we need to make that will help small business grow, because small businesses really generate most of the jobs. So we really did set up a framework that I think, if it is acted on by Congress, and the president also supports some of the recommendations aggressively, can make a real difference on jobs. So I frankly have found my involvement in the Jobs Council the following. One is, I really do believe the issue of jobs is solvable. When I started, I was skeptical. But what it needs is, it needs full cooperation of all parties in Congress, and it needs full cooperation from the private sector. So this is one where I think the private and public sector have to work more in tandem, and hopefully that will happen in the future.
After the election?
After the election.
Frozen till then. Okay, got it. These next two questions are the last ones I'm going to ask you before the students ask you questions. But these are questions that are directed at the students. And the first one is, what's the best piece of advice you were ever given?
Best piece of advice I was ever given was from my father. And what he said was, I actually came home and I was complaining about some issue that I was dealing with. And he said, wait a minute, I don't want to hear excuses. I only want to hear about the things that you can control. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, what you can control is your performance. And he said, if you're going to focus on anything, focus on what you can control. And the only thing you can control is your performance. Now, if you think about that advice, and I think about it almost every day, it is a very empowering statement, because what it says to a person is you can really make a difference, and you can make a difference off of your performance. It also says that you can come up always with a lot of excuses and reasons why you can't do something. Mm-hmm. But if you really focus on your performance, you can accomplish a great deal. And I want to be clear, I'm not naive about the obstacles that are out there, and never have been. But the reality is that I think, particularly for our young people, to understand that they actually do have more control than they may think. Mm-hmm. And that control is really to be focused on performance. Mm-hmm. Whatever they do, focus on performance.
This is a really important question for our students. What makes a person stand out to you as you evaluate them or manage them?
There's several things that make a person stand out to me. What I look for in leaders, first of all, and when I say leaders, doesn't mean you have to have an official position. I look at whether people have a followership. And what I mean by a followership is, do people listen to them? Do they seek their advice and judgment? Because that can occur in any group, formal or informal. The second thing that I look for is integrity. Because to me, integrity means that there's a consistency of words and action. And you can't build a trusting relationship without integrity. Third thing that I look for is, I really look for someone who I think has courage. And to me, courage is the ability to challenge, the ability to speak out, to stand up for what you think is right. And the last quality that I look for is, I look for people, in fact, who have a good sense of humor. Because the challenges we face in life are such that it's sometimes very good to have people around who can keep the spirits up, because motivation is very important.
Laughing at oneself is a useful tool, isn't
Right.
it? Yeah. One more question, and then I would like the students to queue up and ask their questions, please. CEO jobs in modern corporations, I think, are the toughest one can possibly imagine. I'm on a board and I watch our CEO operate. What surprises you about your job, and how would you change it if you could?
Here's, at the end of the day, and this is, again, just my philosophy, is I really enjoy the job. But I think what's very important, and this was some other good advice that I got from someone who had been a CEO, is don't let the job define you. And I see too many CEOs who, in fact, over time, let the job define them. Understand, when you cease being CEO, you still got to live with yourself. You still got to be proud of who you are and what you've done. So I really like almost all the aspects of being CEO. What I would say is that sometimes as CEO, you've got to be involved in a number of tasks that don't really focus enough on the customer. So you have a lot of staff meetings. You've got to deal with that. But I think what is most important for me is there's really not much I would change at all from my position as CEO. And part of that reason that I believe I've got that view is I've tried to be very focused on what I want the role to be. And my view is, about any job, you've got to be passionate about it, you've got to enjoy it, and if you don't, then you should do something else.
Yeah, got it, easy. And Jay, I can't see in the audience here. Is there anybody up at a mic, or is there? Oh, there we go. Please state your name, please, and just ask a question.
Hi, my name is Robert Love. Thank you so much for coming. This was really informative.
Well, thank
you have
you.
some great life lessons. what skills do you think were most important in allowing you to be so successful? And looking to the future with the rapid evolution of technology and advancements in communication and information availability, what skills should we be focusing on today and developing today so that we can be valuable in the future marketplace?
Yeah, so let me talk about 2 or 3 what I'd say technical skills, and then the mindset that you need to have. So I go back to the point I made earlier that what I think is most important in your mindset is to constantly challenge the status quo and constantly challenge conventional thinking. From a skill standpoint, I think, one, there has to be a recognition of what is taking place around the world. And the reality is that I spend a minimum of 50%, if not more, of my time outside the United States. And it is very, very important to understand different cultures, to understand what are different issues that countries are facing. So the broad global perspective that everyone talks about, it's real. It is real. You've got to develop that global perspective. The second thing that's absolutely critical, and I think is one of the most exciting opportunities in business, is the convergence of the offline and the online world. The digital transformation that is occurring. And it is very, very important that you have both a technical understanding and that you appreciate what's going on. So over the last 8 years, I've spent a fair amount of time from a technology standpoint and a digital perspective, spent a lot of time around places like Silicon Valley, and a lot of time with startups because I learn a lot. One of the things I do wherever I travel around the world is I try to arrange a dinner with 15 startup companies. A lot mostly in digital. And one of the things that I find is it is a great two-way exchange. It really keeps me sharp and aware of what's going on. So I would say if I had to single out 2 areas is you want to have a global perspective and you've got to understand what's happening in digital, but it's not enough to just understand digital. You have to, in fact, appreciate this convergence that's taking place of online and offline. Best example of that is Apple Retail, right? Where the retail, physical retail experience has changed as a result of the digital. It's not either or, and that's very important.
Let's go to this side of the room.
Thank you very much. I'm Dan Driscoll. I'm with the MBA program, also working on a startup, actually. But your partnership with Dennis Crowley's company, Foursquare, was really one of the first of its kind. So at the same time that you're facing, kind of continuing with the previous question, this shake-up from a regulatory standpoint, you're also seeing a lot of disruption from this social, mobile, and localized digital front. What's next for American Express in the financial services industry? What do you have to do to, beat back some of the upstarts and stay relevant?
Yeah, here's what's important is, one, what I would emphasize is we don't view ourselves as just being in the financial services industry, nor do we view ourselves as just a payments company. What we clearly view ourselves is that we're playing a major role in commerce. And part of what we're doing is we're bringing together buyers and sellers. So when I talk about our company, one of the points I make is our famous card came out in 1958. 1958, ancient history. But here's the important point here. When that card came out, the US was in the midst of a deep recession. So as we talk about the economic environment we're in now, innovation makes a big difference. Now, the way I talk about our card to digital companies and to commerce companies is I say the card was a platform. Think of the card as a platform to deliver services. That's what we're about. And when you think about our business model, not to get too technical, what's important about our business model is we not only have information of the end user customer we have information from the merchant. What that provides us with is a closed loop. And so one of the important points of why we can do a program with Foursquare or Facebook and why they're excited about working with us is because we know, in fact, if the purchase occurs online or offline. So someone may like something, but do you know, did they action that like? What did they do? So with Foursquare, what was great was to take our data and align it with Foursquare's data, as we've done also with Facebook, so we have the likes and preferences. Now what I'd emphasize is every customer has to opt in. So you opt in knowingly. It's very well known how you have to behave. So what we view increasingly is our job is to help bring together buyers and sellers, but the notion we have and the mindset in our company is think about our company and products and services as a platform. Think of us as a channel. Also think of us as a network. And the mistake we would make strategically, which I think will be a problem for a number of traditional card companies, is they will become more commodity-like over time. And if someone just says, well, look, all Amex does is facilitate a payment, that's a problem. And so what's important is that they see the value that we're able to bring. And that value increasingly is coming not just from what we're doing, but the ability, in fact, to leverage our assets in partnerships.
Hey, Ken, my name's Jennifer. I have two questions, but they're kind of linked together. So my first question is, earlier you mentioned that your company and you are involved in basically in causes. My question with that is, what kind of causes are those and exactly what do y'all do? And the next question is, you mentioned outreach for leadership and helping people with that. What kind of, what are the communities that you do outreach to for leadership?
So let me give some examples. One is we work with nonprofit organizations, as I said, around the world that represent a very diverse range of causes. And what we do is they're nominated by their group, and we in fact then put them through a leadership training program. And in the program that we have in the US, I've participated probably in almost every program that we've had. So we bring in leaders from government, from business, from nonprofits to talk about not only leadership, but how to run a nonprofit, what are the types of issues that you have to deal with, how do you raise money, how do you build up a staff? Because the reality is a lot of nonprofits don't have the leadership strength that they need to. So that's one very important cause. From another cause that we're involved in, Harlem Children's Zone, many of you might know the founder, Jeff Canada. Jeff Canada was my roommate in college, and I worked with him on his first strategic plan for the Harlem Children's Zone. That's important because what they have really put together is a whole strategy and comprehensive program from when someone is an infant all the way through high school. And it is a 360 program, and actually President Obama has endorsed it, and they're now replicating that program. So I think what's critical is not just the range of causes that we're involved in, but what you want to do is have programs that can help drive scale. Because if it just comes to money, that money is only going to go so far. And so what we try to do is we try to get employee engagement in a range of programs that can continue. And then we also try to provide leadership support. So I think for any company, just as you would deal with a business, you've got to say, what are your priorities? How can you scale it up? How can you get your people really motivated around it? And one of the things that we use is we talk about our company being in the service business. And so it's a very natural connection. If we're in the service business, then we want to be involved in programs that will impact our society in a very positive way.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chenault. My name is Ed Zhang. I'm a junior here at the University of Texas. My question to you is, what is your biggest motivator?
You know, I would say the biggest motivation I have is that I really do want to make a difference in the world that we live in. And one of the things I do talk to our people about is that we're in the service business. And when you're in the service business, I put that in the category that's a higher purpose, but that also means that you got to make people's lives better. You've got to improve their lives. You've got to make a difference in their lives. That motivates me a great deal. The second thing that motivates me is to create a company that has both a will to win, wants to win in the marketplace, but also wants to do it the right way, that also understands its obligation to society overall. That motivates me a great deal.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Chenault. My name is Alice, and I just had a question about how you decide how innovations, or what innovations you're going to undertake, because I know business is constantly changing and improving, so you have to have a lot of ideas, but you can't always undertake every single idea. So how do you pick out which ones are going to be successful and which ones are not?
I think it's a balance, and what I try not to do is to have all the ideas just funnel up to me, because there's no way that I'm going to be able to evaluate every good idea out there. So part of what you've got to do is, one, for the company overall, I'll set out areas. So I'll give you one broad area that I said to the company 5 years ago. I said there is an amazing digital transformation that's taking place. This entire company is going to be involved in it. And here are some changes that we need to bring about, and here are some areas that I want to innovate for the company. That's where I talked about having a broader focus on commerce rather than just payments. But then what you've got to do is you've got to let different groups come up with ideas. And what's critical is you've got to, in fact, not only supply the funding, but provide the support. Every great idea that we have been able to implement in the company, I can point to you areas of the company that were directly opposed to that idea. So part of what I have to do is provide air cover and say, no, that idea, even though you may think it's of risk to the company, here's the rationale, here are the reasons, we're going to support that idea. And what's critical is that we've had a number of ideas, particularly over the last 10 years, that have come from some of our younger people in our company. And what was critical is to give them the support and encouragement to drive that idea. So it's got to happen. There's some big ideas that come from the top, but frankly, most ideas really come from all levels in a company if it's running well. But the important role of top leadership is to make sure that those ideas see some light and that people feel they have some sponsorship. And if they fail, and let me be very clear, because I do believe that at the end of the day, I want more successes than failures. So here's my view is I actually think if you really are going to innovate, you will have some failures. And so what you need to make sure is that you don't punish someone for a failure. But here's where I will have issues with people. If in fact they take risks and they weren't aware that it was even a risk. So here's my view of risk-taking. Understand, at least if it's a small, medium, or large risk. And I can deal with that. We can talk that through. But don't, after the fact, tell me, Ken, I did not realize that this could have taken down the company, but I don't want you to do anything. There will be a consequence. Rest assured, there will be a consequence. But to have real innovation, you have to encourage risk-taking.
Thank you. My name is Justin, and first of all, I wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate the time you're taking to share these lessons and experiences with us. My question is that you mentioned that during your career you had a moment where you realized that American Express owned a bunch of different companies that didn't line up with the brand. I was curious how you managed to convince the leadership of the company to make the big strategic move that was divesting from those companies.
Yeah, let me say it occurred over time. And sometimes I felt I was making a lot of progress, and sometimes I was incredibly frustrated. So as I've said to some of our people, there probably have been 3 periods in my career where I almost got so frustrated that I left the company. But I stayed because I really think the company is very special. But it also goes back to, if you really believe in something, you got to fight hard enough. And sometimes it does come to that breaking point, and you can go one way or the other. But what I tried to do, and fortunately was able to galvanize enough people, is really to stand on what the principles were. And particularly those principles that if we're going to support and enhance our brand, does that particular business, how does it support and enhance the brand? And that was the drill that we were able to put people through, and not to get in a situation that someone said, well, just because the business made a lot of money, let's keep it. And in some cases, we sold businesses when they were doing very well. In other cases, we sold businesses when they weren't doing that well. So we didn't always hit the timing right, but it was the right thing for the company. And so part of what I tried to do was to syndicate the arguments and to build a legion of supporters who understood that this was not for personal gain. All right, I was not going to get anything out of it. In fact, some could argue, and I actually had people both inside and outside the company saying, Ken, you're advocating reducing the size of the company. That's not a good thing. And what they didn't realize is we actually grew to be a larger company over time, focused on the right businesses. So this took several years. I want to be clear, this was not a 30-day exercise. This took a number of years.
Please.
Hello, sir. My name is Amrita Chopra, and I want to know, when you started your career during the beginning phase, did you ever face an ethical situation where you're just starting your career and you want to make a mark towards your field, but also you have a decision to make whether the thing is right or wrong to do?
Yeah, look, I think you're going to face that in any profession you choose, any profession. And one of the points that I make, particularly to people in high school, college, business school, is one of the things you want to do during this period is really determine what are your core values and beliefs. And my view is that any company you join, you need to make sure there's an alignment between those values and beliefs that you hold and the company's. Because you'll increasingly be put in a situation where you're going to have to make choices. And frankly, most of the difficult ethical choices are not black or white. They're gray. And if you don't have that core of what you strongly believe should happen, and in most cases, what I say to people is, if you've got a set of core values and beliefs, most people actually know how to separate that out. And then the key thing is to be in a company where if you're questioning certain behaviors, you can raise it. Right? What happens in a lot of companies is that people don't feel comfortable raising the question, well, boy, this doesn't feel particularly right, but I'm not sure who I can go to, and the boss says I should do it, and I'm just not sure, so I'm going to do it. That's a problem. The best run companies are the companies, in fact, because over the long term, are the companies that encourage their employees to, in fact, self-report and raise issues and have that type of environment.
Thank you.
Please.
Good evening, Mr. Chenault. My name is Kirsten Hayes. I'm a student in the McCombs School of Business, and I'm also the president of National Association of Black Accountants.
Great.
My question for you is that you stated to take a challenge. How do you know when to accept a challenge that is given to you when there will be obstacles, including facing fear? And how did you know that you wanted to take a challenge of becoming CEO, and how did you know you were prepared for it?
Here's the point. When I started the company in 1981, American Express was not known as a company that was particularly open to people who look like me. And at the time, frankly, my interest was to work at a large company for 2 or 3 years and then to start my own business. And one of the businesses that I was involved in early in my career, we sold merchandise through the mail. This really sounds like ancient history. But it was a great business at that time for a fairly young kid. And it was $100 million in sales. 3 years, we grew it to $600 million. And I tried to buy it from the company. That should be a clue right there that CEO was not one of the objectives and not necessarily one that I thought I should even strive for. And it wasn't just a view of saying, would they appoint someone who looked like me into that job? It was really, was that something that I had as a goal and objective? And frankly, at the time, that was something that I just wasn't thinking about. I just didn't even view that as an opportunity. What's terrific about the environment that we're in now, there are no limitations on what you can dream about or think about. Then the next issue is, the challenge is, how do you make that happen? And so what I think is important is, and this goes back to what my father said, is there are things that you can't control. But what I did focus on was my performance, both my business performance and how I could become a better leader. Because here's what you want to do if you take the view, which I do, that you should challenge. You always want to be in a position that if that environment is not right for you, you have the confidence based on your experience that you can say, I'm going to seek another alternative. All right, so this may sound strange for someone who's been with the same company since 1981. The first 12 years I was with the company, I said I'll basically re-up every 2 years. I was not, I'm going to be a long timer, it was every 2 years. But what I also believe, and I say this to people in our company, is I want our people to stay with our company, I want our people to grow with our company. But part of what you want to have is you want to have skills and capabilities that you are not dependent on any single company for your success and, more importantly, for your self-worth. And for me, that gave me the confidence to say, I'm going to take on some challenges. Now, you've got to make an assessment of what challenges you take on, and you've got to analyze the environment. And you've got to understand, again, is the risk small, medium, or large? And you can't take every week a large challenge. You've got to balance that off. But I really encourage you, and I would encourage everyone in this room, that it's important to take on challenges, and particularly the earlier in your career, the earlier you can do it, whether it's in college or graduate school, is take some risks relative to the courses you take, the experiences that you go through, because that's going to put you in a much better situation and give you a level of confidence that you'll be ready for the next challenge.
Great. Ken, we have time for one more question.
Okay.
Mr. Chenault, thanks for coming today. My question is more geared towards your other involvements outside of American Express. I'm curious as to why you've gotten involved in a lot of the boards of these prestigious organizations, and if there are any lessons or experiences you've taken from those and provided in American Express.
So let me first talk about the for-profit and the nonprofit. So I did IBM because from a technology standpoint and a global standpoint, they seemed to me to be one of the most global companies, and they were involved in almost every aspect of technology. So that was an area that I wanted to really be more involved in. Procter & Gamble, what was intriguing to me was the customer focus that they have and the hundreds of brands that they manage and how they, in fact, go through the process of developing different products and services for different customer segments all over the world. That was on the for-profit side. On the nonprofit side, I really look for the cause and I look for the leader. And what I've tended to do is there are some large groups I'm involved with, but in nonprofits, I tend to like to work with smaller nonprofits because I think I can make more of a difference with them and have more of an impact. And because a number of CEOs work with much larger groups, and I do some of that, I like the connection with small startup groups and the impact that I can see that they can make. And obviously the Harlem Children's Zone was something for me that was a startup, but was an incredibly fulfilling experience to see how that has expanded and grown. And so I try to replicate that constantly.
Thanks.
Great. Ken, I'm going to have Jay come up to present you with the memento of the visit.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Chenault, thank you so much for coming. It's clear that you're viewed as a leader and a source of inspiration for all the students here. You know, I just want to give a note to the audience that 2 days ago, I received word from Mr. Chenault's office that there was no power in his office due to the hurricane, that the streets outside were flooded, and that Hurricane Sandy might affect Mr. Chenault's ability to make it to this event. And the fact that you're here today right now speaks a lot about the type of person you are. And I just want to give you a round of applause and thank you so much for coming. It certainly means a lot. Certainly means a lot to us. Now, here in the VIP program, we have a tradition of giving each speaker a gift. And so without further ado, I want to award you with a personalized Stetson cowboy hat that
I can't say I'm surprised.
We'd love it if you tried it on right now.
Good.
Is it the right size?
I think it's the right size. I think it's the right size. So, all right.
Can you give us an echo?
Absolutely. Thank you.